Hello and welcome to the Meditation Conversation. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm joined by Todd Steinberg. Todd is the co founder of Komuso, which is dedicated to helping people breathe better to feel better. He helped develop a necklace called the Shift, which, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the shift right here that I'm wearing. And it simply slows the pace of your breath. Before Komuso, he knew very little about wellness and unknowingly suffered from high functioning anxiety, which led to the product discovery. Todd is dedicated to educating the world about how breathing better as a habit can be life changing. So, welcome, Todd. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that wonderful intro.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, let's just start with as we're growing up, we're never really taught how to think or how to breathe. Um, how is that directly tied to breathing? And why is it important?
I mean, fantastic opening question. And that's usually where I start is getting right into the numbers. We have an average of 50,000 thoughts per day. And there's a study done that said that 80% of those thoughts can be negative. So 50,000 is a big number, right? And when you contrast that to an average of 20,000 breaths per day, I think what most people don't understand because we're not taught this is that the brain is talking to the diaphragm, and our breaths communicate with our thoughts. And when our thoughts get a little bit tense or negative, our breath gets shallow and uneven. And when our breath gets long and deep and even, our mind usually starts to calm down. And it's all physiological and neurological. But if you contrast how monks are raised versus how we're raised, their first lesson in monk school is how to breathe. And I like to just start with, hey, if I told you to take a deep breath, how would you do it? And I'm always talking about breath. So when I do just to have a random conversation on the street, I'm like, just show me, because I'm usually looking at someone's chest to see how they're breathing and what kind of state they're in. And once I've learned this, I can't stop devouring all the science. But they usually take a deep breath like this, which is nice. But what that person just did with that really deep inhale was kind of give a little bit of a gas pedal, because the inhale is the gas and the exhale is the brake. It's just like an easy way to look at it. So what most people didn't understand, and I didn't until very recently, was that the exhale is where your vagus nerve is kind of tied to and where your parasympathetic nervous system lies. And that's where relaxation is. So if you're going to take a deep breath to feel calm, it's how you take that deep breath and then how many times you take that deep breath that's going to actually change your state of mind. So um, learning this at age, what was I, 36, was one part disappointing in that I didn't learn it before, but five parts like totally exciting because I was able to, really change my life by doing one simple thing that was right under my nose the whole time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, what kind of changes did you notice as you changed your breath?
So it was actually with a friend of mine who is a therapist and business partner now. He was saying, look, like I was trying to learn meditation and I was just uh, very random about it. Some days I would, some days I wouldn't. I don't think I was really tapping into the power of it. The gray matter. I understood the purpose of it and I respected the science of it. But as it related to the breathing, I didn't know what I was doing. So he said, you know what? Let me give you a little bit of some training wheels here. And he handed me a straw. And I thought he was crazy, but he's like, look, just breathe through this straw. Just exhale through it. That's all I want you to do for 2 minutes. And as I did that, this crazy thing happened. It was, I guess at the moment I was feeling a little bit tense. So I felt my shoulders drop. I felt my heart rate come down. I almost felt like this sensation, like I was floating, like I started to rise from where I was. It was bizarre because all I was doing was breathing, right? There was no pill, there was no magical pixie dust. It was just a longer exhale that was 4 or 5 times in the making that made me stop right in my tracks and say, "Whoa, what is happening here? Why am I feeling calm? I love this. Don't get me wrong, but why am I feeling calm?" And that's what triggered this whole research event of, wait a second, breath is tied to our state of mind. How did I not know this? But yeah, it was simply because of a straw that changed everything.
That's so cool. So if we talk about the shift, it does have like the circumference ish of a straw. Now I'm really interested in because I've watched, the videos and I've or and the read the instructions, and you're supposed to breathe through it in such a way that it doesn't really make a noise,
Yeah.
right?
So you're looking at it, and I don't know how many people can see us right now, but you're looking at it and it looks like a whistle.
Mhm.
It's,
That's the thing, because 'cause it's got this and you can make it whistle.
yeah.
Like, I've played around with them, like, I can make it whistle.
If you want to, there's that built-in capability, absolutely. But we didn't want it to be distracting uh, for other people, near that person, or we didn't want someone to have to feel forced to play a song because the actual brand itself, Komuso, is inspired by the Japanese monks of 17th century Japan. So it came from a whistle, and that's why you see that part shaved off right there. That's what it's called, a shakuhachi, and it's this amazing looking flute played by these monks, these wooden flutes that were incredible. That we just so happened to see at an art fair one day, and it was like right around that time where I had learned the straw breathing technique. So it's like, wait a second, ancient science with meditation, and they would play the flute to meditate, and then it was like modern science uh, with the straw breathing and the physiological, response to the nervous system through breath. And it just kind of dawned on me, it was like, hey, this is a meditation tool. This is a breathing tool. This is something that can make a difference. So we wanted to make it easy for people. We didn't want people to have to learn how to use it. We wanted to just be like immediately accessible. So the use is simple in that you should take a deep inhale through your nose, and always, I can't stress this enough, always try to breathe through your nose. When you're not obviously eating or talking, you're going to get more oxygen into your blood cells. When you do that, you're going to be, it basically acts as a filter for all those toxins to come out as well. So the inhale, and this is another thing that I didn't realize, we're typically breathing into our chest, into our upper chest. So we're not accessing like 3/4 of our lungs. And that's where a lot of that oxygen lives. So, and then the oxygen to CO2, that exchange is important too. So a lot happening subconsciously and unconsciously that we are never aware of because, again, we weren't taught this. But when you take a deep, deep inhale through your nose into your belly to make your diaphragm, your rib cage expand, that's the right breath. That's the right inhale, right? And then if you just give it a quick pause and let the air escape through the shift or tool, it sounds like this. And what you'll notice there is that typically your exhale is what, 1 second, 2 seconds. You're just kind of racing from one breath to the next. Sometimes we're holding our breath. And what that just did to my nervous system was say, hey, everything's okay. And I think what the studies have found is that we are constantly living in some state of fight or flight, which great if you are being chased by a grizzly bear, or if you're trying to bench press 300 pounds, like that's when you need that adrenaline and cortisol, right? But what we don't realize is that we're checking our phone with an average of 150 times per day. It's not, I didn't just make up that number. There's a study there. 150 times. Do you think our brains were equipped to do that? Like, do you think we should be distracted that many times a day? And that's why meditation is so important, right? Because you need to sit in that stillness. You need to give your mind a break, even if it's for 5 minutes. But because of that pattern happening, we may not be able to control all of our responses neurologically, but what we can control is our breath. And if we can get our breath from what's normally, and again, into the numbers here, but we're breathing like 18 to 22 breaths per minute. Not exactly healthy, because that's the breathing rate of, maybe like a light jog or a fast walk. If we can get more to 6 breaths per minute more often, that's where the heart, mind, body, that's where there's this synthesis. And it's just really, if you think about your prefrontal cortex, right? This is where all the, executive decisions are made. That's the executive functioning part of the brain. That is, those two hemispheres of your brain are aligned when you're breathing in a uh, you can call it anything, but really it's just even breathing. So like if you can go 5 in and 5 out, and you can do that for a few minutes every day, multiple times a day, it's kind of like you're just hitting the reset button on your body and brain. Let's say you don't have the time to meditate or sit down or plug into your phone to get that soundtrack. You're able to just kind of hit that button to say, hey, body, hey, brain, like, we're going to do a quick reset. We don't need to be anywhere or be outside or have our journal. It's already built within us. And I think our message was, because breathing is unconscious, because we don't think about it, it's part of our autonomic nervous system. The tool, because it sits around your neck, because you wear it, you're kind of like, oh yeah, this is something I have to be doing. And this is something that, like brushing your teeth twice a day, we don't miss that, right? Like we don't, we don't, we treat our teeth like they're more important than our minds sometimes. And that was my life. So now that daily practice of coming back to your breath and coming back for just a few minutes to realign yourself and to get yourself into that state where, maybe you felt a little bit, you didn't realize it, but because you checked your phone, you're entering what's called tech apnea or screen apnea. So everyone out there, the next time you check your phone, check your breath, because what's happening is there's something called this anticipatory, response, where no matter what message is waiting for you, your brain is trying to figure out if it's good news or bad news. And when it's doing that, it's telling your breath, wait, hold on, we don't know what we're going to need yet. We might need some cortisol, we might need some adrenaline. So holding the breath sends that alert signal to the fight or flight saying, hey, let's get ready. And imagine that happening 150 times a day, unconsciously, not even aware of it. And that's where, right, if you could just bring more awareness to your breath, then you'll be able to say like, oh, wow, I'm holding my breath, or my tongue's on the roof of my mouth and my shoulders are kind of raised a little bit. This is the stress response. And this is what we're living in way too often. So the good news is that the solution really isn't that difficult. It's just becoming more aware.
I love that. Thank you for telling us about tech apnea. I've never heard of that before, and it makes so much sense. And now I have like 15 questions for you. But so I'll just free flow it. But but when you talk about the reminder, like having the necklace as a reminder, one of the things that I have found is that it's an amazing tool to use, and just catching a glimpse of it then also tunes me into my breath. So being armed with the knowledge that you've just given us in terms of what it does to our brain, what, tech apnea, and these kind of how many thoughts we have per day, and what our body, the different signals that the body gives, like the tensing of the shoulders and the tongue on the roof of the mouth and things like that. We can start to just, we have this device, this, not a technical device, but this, thing that we're wearing, that like you look at it, it's beautiful, but you catch a glimpse and it's like, oh yeah, my breath, and it's like, oh, okay. So, even if, it has been made to be pretty discreet, but even if we are in a place where it's like, okay, I'm in a public bathroom and I don't, like maybe we feel self-conscious about actually using it in that moment, but it can just be like, oh, let me just do like five intentional breaths where I feel my ribs expanding, just through that connection of seeing it, a
I mean,
visual connection.
think about just sitting across from someone, right? What is it? Is it more fun to be with someone who is a little bit tense, or you can tell is just really relaxed, and that energy is flowing, right? Like you can feel someone's energy. Your energy is affecting their energy. So before I like to engage with people, it's that checking in of like, okay, let's get all the sensors here of what's happening. Is there any signs of stress? And if there is, great. I just identified it. So it's like I was able to identify it before I communicate that, like that tension or that shortness of those energy, wavelengths. So it's, or even abrasiveness, right? But we are able to do that, and it's called interoception. This all comes from our therapy department of our brand, because we have a therapist that's constantly learning these things. And interoception just means that you're doing like that full body scan but you're doing it so often that you're able to be so good at it. It's kind of like a muscle memory of the slightest little impulse from wait, my tongue is on the roof of my mouth. Is there something that just happened with a thought? Aha, I just got a text from so and so, or I'm about to meet up with whoever it is, or I'm anticipating something, an email to come, and my mind keeps ruminating back to that. You can always track it down if you get good at it. And that's why it's like if you talk to anyone who is a breathwork practitioner or in this space, they talk mostly. There's a lot of different breathing techniques, and they're all fascinating. But 70% of the game is awareness. If you're aware, you can't use these breathing techniques unless you're aware of what's happening. So if you don't understand where you are in your state of mind, then how do you know which breath technique to apply, or how do you know what type of service it needs? Like you go to a mechanic, it's like, hey, what's up? What's wrong? It's like the brakes are squeaking. Okay, I know how to fix that. So it's just becoming better at identifying all of these clues. And some people feel it in different places. Some people's knees hurt when they're stressed. I mean, stress, just always know that whatever's happening with your mind, it's going to manifest. If there's a problem, it's going to manifest somewhere. Whether you can't sleep at night, your knees hurt, joint pain. One of the scariest ones is basically inflammation, because sometimes you don't know where that inflammation is happening. And oh, by the way, heart disease is still the number one killer in the United States. So that might be happening to your arteries inadvertently, and you can't measure that, you can't feel that. So that's why, like, what we like to really harp on and press on is like, just try to bring your mind back to your body as much as you can. And what you're doing half the time is great because you're actually being present when you're doing it. And like, how often do our minds just kind of wander? I love to ask people, when you're in the shower, ask yourself, where are you? Because your mind is always, wherever it is, whatever I have to do, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do later? You're ruminating on the past. Like I should have said this or that or the other. So being present is a beautiful thing to say. It's another thing to actually practice it and build that muscle. So it goes in so many
Yeah.
directions.
Yeah, I love that. So, heart disease still the number one cause of death, not grizzly bear attacks.
You're shocking, right?
I know. Well, I guess it's the cortisol. So we know how to get away from grizzly bears, but we don't know how to get away from heart disease.
Yeah, and it's like, and I'm not saying that don't watch your diet or don't exercise. Those are all
Yeah,
critical
yeah,
to
yeah.
your to your health and to your well being. I think what I'm saying is that because you're going back to the phone, those 150 notifications, and each one of those drips is a drip of cortisol, and cortisol it's a stress hormone. It's not a bad thing. You need it sometimes. But you need to balance it in moderation. Um, so I think what we're saying here is that fight or flight is not a bad thing. Cortisol is not a bad thing unless it happens too often. And I think what these studies are saying is that because we're so much more engaged in information, there's so much to absorb every day. I mean, we have our news we have to follow. We have our all of our emails. We have our text messages. We have 100 different apps that are sending us notifications. So if you can get yourself at least in a space where, as I get it, I'm addicted to my phone as well. It's part of my business. It's part of my family. Like, unfortunately, we are where we are. Like we're not going backwards here. So it's just learning how to manage it. And in that case, it's like with the heart disease, it's if you can feel your heart rate, it's probably not a good thing, right? It's probably elevated for a reason. So it's just like investigate. I always talk to my wife about it. It's like, okay, the tension's here. Let's track it down. And I think that one of the coolest metaphors I heard was it's like pretend like you have antivirus software. And you remember back in the day when you would download a song or something like that, and you'd see this bing, you just downloaded the Trojan horse virus. And it's great because you see it, you don't have to search for it, you can just delete it and take action, and it's done. Installing that software into our minds, into our body is great because before you start to develop that hypertension and you start feeling it in your heart, you're able to diffuse it before it like actually starts to build, like plaque in your arteries and things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
That's
important.
amazing. Yeah, I was just teasing. I was just being silly about the grizzly bear, but um, because I like to use that kind of metaphor too, where it's like, this is stress, that stress response, that sympathetic nervous system is really powerful and helpful, in bursts when you need it, if you're being chased, if you're in danger, but we do go around like our bodies are in that response all the time unnecessarily. So I
Have
was
you?
with you, but I was just being silly.
No, no, of course. Have you actually heard of catastrophizing?
No, I haven't heard of that.
So that is it's one of the key words of our partner Daniel. He has a practice in Atlanta, and catastrophizing is, I mean, I'm still guilty of it, and it's when you you know, again, 50,000 thoughts a day, so there's a lot going on. One of these thoughts pops up, right? Little thought bubble of, something with, forgot to email so and so. And then it's, wait a second, who else did I forget to email? Oh my God, what if I forgot to email someone that was really important? And then you know what? People probably think that I'm not doing a good job, and then I'm gonna get fired. And if I get fired, then I can't pay my bill, and then I'm gonna lose my house. Like, we do this thing, and it's just this. It's called catastrophic thinking, where one really like innocent thought of like, oh yeah, like email John back, like easy. I'll just text myself a note or something, can turn into this, I'm going to lose my house. And obviously that's a very exaggerated example, but we tend to connect red dots with red dots. And what I mean by red dots is like these negative thoughts. That's like, so I forgot to email him back. And I also forgot last week that it was my sister's birthday. And then I didn't move my car, like, and I got a ticket. So what's wrong with me? What's going on lately? Am I stupid? Am I like, is it, and you start to beat up yourself, like the self-talk is a huge thing, but these thoughts just attract each other. They love negativity loves negativity, right? So it's like these ions, attaching themselves, and it can put you into a state of mind and into a mood that's not very fun. And it's
Yeah.
talking about cortisol again. So, and then bringing back the grizzly bear, it's like now you're kind of feeling like a grizzly bear is chasing you. Not fun. And that's not where we're supposed to be. So it's building the ability to catch that one red thought before it attaches itself to another. Like, wait a second. No, I'm not going to let you do this, brain. Like, we're not doing this right now. We're going to just pour water on this. And how? It's simply by being aware and then using a few breaths to slow it all down, so that the heart rate and the adrenaline and the cortisol and the muscles tensing, like, that doesn't all take grip, and then all of a sudden you're off into fight or flight and you're not very fun to be around. So, and then what else does that happen? What else does that lead to is, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners get into this, is it's hard to sleep at night. This is what's happening. I used to have this press conference in my head of like, head hits the pillow and it's like, Todd, what are we doing tomorrow? What's happening with this relationship? How are you paying your bills? And it's like, everybody stop. Like, this is not time for those questions. We're gonna go into a different place. And that's where the breathing techniques can get your brain and your heart and your body into a place where it feels like it's resting. And really there's nowhere else to go when you're thinking about your breath and when you're slowing your breath down, other than to that place where you feel like you can fall asleep. And
Yeah.
and you need to sleep.
I love that. I mean, there's so many different ways to it's very empowering. It's like, how can we be more and more the creator of our existence and what it is that we want for ourselves? Because when we're in these stressful states and we're not sleeping, our mind is racing. This is so common that people, lay down to go to sleep, and then that's when everything starts screaming at them. And nobody really wants that. I mean, well, most people don't. Maybe some people, but never say nobody. But most people, want to sleep peacefully. They want to be able to fall asleep, as an example, but they just think that this is what my mind does. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's what your mind is doing right now. But there are actions that you can take to get more control over your experience, including what's happening physiologically. So I am so loving all of these biohacks. One of the things that you mentioned was the tongue on the roof of the mouth. So can you tell us more about that? Because as you were talking, I was like, my tongue's on the roof of my mouth. Like, I think that's how I hold my position. So what's up with that?
Yeah. What is up with that, right? And there's all these things and that's I love talking about this stuff because most people it's not part of our daily vernacular. Like we're not having coffee talking about the tongues on our mouth, right? Or from our mouth. So what I was going back to stress manifesting in a certain way, everyone has their own little thing, right? And mine is the tongue on the roof of my mouth. And what I realized, I read it in an article once, and I stopped right in my tracks. I was like, "Whoa, that's me." And there isn't a problem with it, right? There's nothing wrong with you that you're doing that. But what I started to associate was when I was tense, I was doing it, and I learned that when I was relaxed, that wasn't happening. And I was starting to apply more, like the more tense I was, the more pressure I was applying on the roof of my mouth and kind of like toward my teeth. And then I got to the point where the upper row of my teeth were a little sore. In some cases, I was applying so much pressure. Some people do it with their nails. Some people, and I'm not just talking about fidgeting, but some people will play with their hands and their fists, and it's just the body's way of expressing what's happening. Right? It has to get out. Whatever's happening in here it manifests somewhere in your feet, in your back. Some people I've hurt it. Some people's knees hurt. I don't know why. I'm not a scientist or a doctor, but I can tell you that if you're able to investigate where you're feeling the stress, so next time you are feeling stressed, you'll probably feel your chest is tight and that your heart rate is increased. Look for other signs. Where else is it? Are you, some people, this is a big one, is especially most of us that work, basically all day, you start leaning into your computer, right? So you lean in, and what's happening is your shoulders are kind of rounding and curling over. And what that's doing is, well, it's very innocent because, you just feel like you're concentrating more. It's a good thing. It's not. Because when your shoulders curl over, you're putting pressure on your diaphragm against your lungs so they can't get as much air in and out. So now you're breathing shallow, which is causing that fight or flight. Whereas if you had your posture back, and I'm not talking about award-winning posture here, but if you can sit with your chest out and shoulders back more often, now you're getting more air in and you don't have to work hard at it. It's just like you're breathing better just because you're sitting better, right? But the stress sometimes makes you, or even depression, right? It kind of makes you kind of sulk down or lean in a little bit or roll over. So the tongue, the shoulders, feet, nails, hair, it find your it and identify it so that you're able to sense it when it happens. Like, oh, I'm rolling my toes again, or I'm, whatever it is, or I'm grinding my teeth. For me, again, it's the tongue on the roof of the mouth, along with a lot of people, I think can agree with that. And again, it's okay if it's happening. It's just understand what's happening with your mind at the same time. Like, oh, I think I was just a little, and you don't have to be in a panic state to be in fight or flight. It's a spectrum, right? You can be in like a 4 or 5, which again, if you're playing tennis, like cool, that's where you need to be. But if you're trying to sleep or you're trying to be creative or focus or respond to an email and you're just not getting there, you're not able to articulate it the way you really want to, it's probably because you're in fight or flight. So it's just one of those little things, those little physical cues you can pick up on.
I love it. Thank you so much. So, how can people learn more about you and find Komuso and connect?
Thank you so much. So, again, my name is Todd, and founded Komuso Design. It's Komuso Design. You can just Google us. The tool is called the Shift. So, the Shift is a breathing tool, and again, it's just something that all the stuff we talked about today, it can help you really start to turn the tide on those little bouts of stress and tension and sadness and or whatever doesn't feel right. And I'll leave you with this too. This just happened last night. If any of you follow Dr. Andrew Huberman, he's a professor at Stanford. He's got a very popular Instagram channel, I think a YouTube following. I'm a big fan of his, but he came out with, and a lot of you guys meditate along with myself. There was a study just done that said that 5 minutes of structured breathing per day can be more productive than 5 minutes of meditation. And I'm not saying that to denigrate meditation because meditation is absolutely critical. But the breathing, depending on where you are in your life, like if you're going to do something for your mind, that's going to help more, and it's going to give you more of those practical benefits that can get you through your day, to get you to sleep better, get you to feel better. One of the quotes I love to use most is like, a rising tide lifts all boats. And if breathing can be the tide that lifts your emotions, your sleep, your longevity, I mean, all these things at once, and you're doing something for yourself that takes 5 minutes a day. So whether it's through our tool or through just conscious breathing in the morning or before bed at night, or ideally all of the above, uh, we think you'll be better off. And I'm just happy to have the opportunity to talk about breathing today.
Wonderful. Well, I have loved this. Thank you so much for everything, all the light that you've shed today on our physiology and this magic key of the breath. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Todd.
Kara, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been fun.